All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Let us begin. So we are continuing in Mirz Hashem in Mesilas Yesharim, and we are picking up towards the end, actually, of Perek Chav Dalit, chapter 24. Excuse me. Actually, I sent out the sheets on the WhatsApp as well. So remember, the Ramchal was speaking to us about this idea about Yiras Hachet. So we explained that Yiras Hachet really manifests itself on two levels. There is we'll call a basic Yiras Hachet, or a more elementary level of Yiras Hachet, which is really a fear of punishment. Every action has a repercussion and ramification. And so Yiras Hachet on a basic level is, I don't want to get punished. And therefore, again, I fear sin. Not that I fear sin, but I fear the punishment which comes along with sin. But then, of course, there's higher level Yiras Hachet, which is more of a reverence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I recognize how precious and how special my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, and I realize that every time I do something that is inappropriate, so I go ahead and I end up going ahead and making or creating a distance between myself and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the fundamental idea that's unfolding over here, that I recognize that at the end of the day, my actions somehow have repercussions and ramifications on the Ribono Shel Olam, or on my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I seek to avoid that. So he gives examples of this. So specifically where this plays out is this leads to a person examining his actions in the present and in the past, which means that every time I act, I look at what I'm doing, I analyze, and I ask myself a simple question: will this action bring me closer to Hashem or drive me further from Hashem? And I ask that question both as I'm committing the act, I'm about to do something. Does it bring me closer or push me farther? And then afterwards, when I think about or when I reflect on what it is that I've done, I look at my actions through, the rearview mirror, and I ask myself, was this good? Was it not good? And I will say, if you remember, this kind of links back to the beginning of the Sefer, because if it's good, then I'll reinforce and do again. If it's not good, then at the end of the day, I will avoid. And he gives examples of this. Va'amru zichronim levrach al Moshe va'Aaron be'inyan shemen hamishcha shemashach Moshe li Aaron shari ne'emar bo al b'sar adam lo yisach. So we'll see, remember again, when Moshe Rabbeinu went ahead and appointed Aaron as the Kohen Gadol. It's past week's parsha. So remember again, what does he do? He anoints Aaron with oil. Okay, so nothing, Shalom Mishcha anointing oil. Now remember, when it came to Shemen HaMishcha, the Torah gives an explicit prohibition that says, Al Besar Adam Lo Yisach. Shemen HaMishcha anointing oil cannot be used stam for a person. In other words, a person can't take anointing oil and decide to go ahead and rub it on their skin for non-sacred purposes. So what was the concern? After anointing Aaron with oil, and again in a permitted fashion, Aaron was concerned that somehow the oil was used in an inappropriate fashion. He was just concerned, he was just scared that maybe somehow I used the oil in a way that I wasn't supposed to. V'zel Shonam va'al davar zed da'ag Moshe va'amar shema ma'alti b'shemen hamishcha yatzes abaskol va'amra kishemen hatov al harosh yored al hazakan zekan Aaron kital chemon ein bo me'ilah af shemen hamishcha sheviskan Aaron ein bo me'ilah. So we'll say, so again, with the idea is Aaron, and now you have to understand what's happening over here. Aaron is anointed by Moshe. Moshe is given the instruction by God. Part of the instruction is anointing with Shemen HaMishcha. Yet Aaron has this concern that maybe too much oil was used, maybe it wasn't used in the right way, and therefore maybe I committed an act of Me'ilah. Right? Me'ilah means illegal use of consecrated property. To which a baskol, the heavenly voice, comes out and essentially says to Aaron, you're good. You're good. Don't worry about it. You are totally fine. You're totally fine. And yet still, va'adayin haya Aaron doig, shema Moshe lo ma'al vani ma'alti. So then Aaron's still concerned, maybe Moshe did the right thing, but maybe somehow I didn't do the right thing. Yotza baskol va'amra, hine matovu ma'anoim, shevas achim gam yachad. Ma Moshe lo ma'ol, afatolo ma'alto. Another baskol comes out and says, Aaron, calm down. Don't worry. Just like Moshe didn't commit mi'ilah, you didn't commit mi'ilah. Hari l'chamidasim shel chasidim shafilu b'mitzah sha'asu. Hayudagim va'omrim shemanis arev b'hem shemen psul chas v'chalila. So we'll say, so what's happening over here? Moshe and Aaron committed an act, and they did something that God told them. Yet what they're still doing is they're analyzing their act, and they're asking, was the act appropriate? Now we'll say, so again, this is something that they're being told to do by God. Yet you see them analyzing their actions and wondering, did we do what was correct? So the Ramchal uses this as an example of yiras hachet. We'll say this is what it means, that even after you do something, to go ahead and look back and introspect and ask yourself, was the action correct? Did I do it correctly? He gives other examples. Va'avram, acharei sheyatza lazar leben achav lo sheshavu oso, hayim mispachid va'omer shema lo zaku masa v'gamri. After Lot, remember this is the war of the 4 kings against the 5. So after Avram goes out to save Lot, right? He's concerned that maybe he didn't have the requisite merit for all of the miracles that HaKadosh Baruch Hu performed for him. Huma shepershu, page Reish Nun Beis, Huma shepershu zichron levracha, al pasek al tira Avram. Rabbi Levi Amar, Lefishay Avram mispached va'omer, ben kol uchlesin shaharagti, shema haya benem tzadik echad, o yorei shemayim echad, lefichach ne'emar lo al tira Avram. What was Avram concerned about? Avram was concerned because he went out to war. And during war, you kill people. So what was Avram scared about? Maybe amongst all of the people I killed someone who didn't deserve to die. It happens, Rahman al-Islam, as part of war. Innocent people die. So Avram Avinu was concerned. Now again, I will say, understand, the whole war was miraculous. Avram Avinu went out with a very small fighting force and conquered 4 mighty regional kings. Right, 4 mighty regional kings. So this was a major battle. He only won it because God assisted him. Yet at the end of the day, he's concerned, maybe I killed someone innocent. Maybe I did something I shouldn't have done. So what happens? Chadosh Baruch Hu tells him, Al tira Avram. Don't worry. Don't be afraid. Va'amru b'tana debeira Elio, Al tira Avram, ein omrim al tira, al mishu yarishmayim la'amito. V'hizos hayira ha'amid sha'amra alav, ein lo la Kadosh Baruch Hu ba'olamo, ela otzar shel yiras shamayim bilvad. So I will say, says the Ramchal, what you're seeing over here, this is true yiras shamayim. Yiras shamayim doesn't mean, again, it does mean on a basic level a fear of punishment, because also remember again, to have a fear of punishment is significant also, because remember, fear of punishment is a very powerful way to control what I do. Because remember, I will say, a lot of times we lose sight that there's even repercussions, ramifications for our actions. So at least have a fear of punishment means that maybe I will avoid engaging in some negative things because I don't want the patch, I don't want the punishment. So we're not minimizing that, and we're not minimizing the effectiveness of it. All that Ramchal is trying to teach us is, don't stop there. See, too many times our Yiras Shamayim ends at Yiras HaOnesh, ends at fear of punishment. Says Ramchal, there's a much higher level, a Yiras HaRomamos, a recognition of the greatness, of a reverence that I have for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and how meaningful this relationship is with me, and for me. And therefore, I don't want to do things that are going to erode or potentially damage the relationship. And so I ask myself simple questions such as, will this action bring me closer or take me farther? If it'll bring me closer, I'm going to do it. If it's going to create a distance, I'm going to avoid. But the interesting part is, and when do you ask yourself this question? In 2 dimensions of time. In real time, Bahova, in the present, I'm about to act. I'm about to do something. I ask myself the question, and even I ask it retrospectively as well. After I've acted, I think about my actions. I contemplate my actions. I look in the rear view mirror at my actions and ask myself, did they bring me closer? Did they bring me farther? And I really ask, and what the Gemara Michal is bringing over here are examples of great people who, after the fact, ask themselves these questions. Was I right or was I wrong? Did I kill innocent people? Did I not kill innocent people? Did I inappropriately use the Shemen HaMishcha, the anointing oil, or not? I will say this represents a heightened level of retrospective, introspective thought. Right? So I'm looking in the rearview mirror and analyzing my actions. Did I do what was right or not? Let's finish the parak. Shirak leMoshe hayakal lasigal mimnei rov devekuso ba'yisparch shemo ki achirim vaday shachorim onea gadol hu lahem. So we'll say what we're describing over here is a type of yiras shamayim that is very hard and very difficult. Moshe Rabbeinu had this type of yiras shamayim. But ultimately, again, it's difficult for the regular people ultimately to acquire it. Amnam kol chassid v'chassid roilo lihishtadel v'hasig mimeno kol ma sheyuchal shneimar yiru es Hashem kidoshav. So we'll say, but again, even though this level of yiras shamayim, this second level of yiras shamayim, is so difficult to acquire, nevertheless, every chassid, which is what each of us strives to be, must make the necessary attempt to acquire it. All right, we'll stop over here for today. Me'ez Hashem, tomorrow we begin the new parak of Parak Chafhei. Shkoyach. All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Let us begin. Let us begin. We begin by thanking our Talmud Torah sponsors, or our shir sponsors this morning. Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Nisan, Frank and Debbie Spector, for dedicating all of the shiurim and droshos this month in deep gratitude to the entire Kehillah. Paul and Kathy Pollack, for dedicating all of the shiurim and droshos this month in memory of Paul's father, Shmuel ben Zechariah, his mother Sarah bas Avram, great-grandmother Cyril bas Reb Dov. We thank our Daf Yomi sponsors for this morning, Shmuel and Tzivia Davis, in memory of Tzivia's father, Leib ben Koppel Betzalel. And we thank Menashe and Bracha Ephron for dedicating the daf this morning in memory of Moshe ben Yaakov, Liba Ahuva Chaya, Bas Moshe, and Chava Bas Avram, Tolchinsky, Brana Bas Alter Yerachmiel, and Yaakov Moshe ben Yosef Halevi Ephron. And we also dedicate our learning this morning in the Zuchos of Analias Neshama from Mindel Perel Bas Yitzchak Leib, the aunt of Shmuel Moshe David Artman, who was nifteris yesterday. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah and the families a nechama. We thank all of our sponsors for their sponsorship. So we'll say with that, let us begin. We continue today in the incredible journey of Hilchos Muktzah. Really incredible. Now, I just want to point out, it's gonna just be like another day or so until we really wrap, well, maybe a day or so, till we go ahead and wrap our heads around the full scope of the halacha l'maisa. But right now, what we're doing is we're kind of building up the framework, because you begin to see this machlokes Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda, which is the most yesodistic machlokes we have in Hilchos Muktzah. We're going to continue to build that out a bit more, and again, along the journey, establish the different categories of muktzah, and then in Meretz Hashem, I promise we will get to halacha l'maisa. So, we're picking up today's daf is Mem Hey 45, and we are picking up 2, 4, 6 lines down from the top, the last word on the line. V'rav. Now I have 7 lines down. V'rav Rabbi Yehuda Sirlei. So I will say, I actually should have gone another 2 lines yesterday, but does Rav really hold like Rabbi Yehuda? V'habba'u minei dirav. They asked Rav the following kasha: Ma'al litaltulei shraga de chanuksa mikamecha bari b'shabsa. So what's this very interesting question? Can you carry the Hanukkah candles? Right? Can you go ahead? Now, the truth is, really what it's saying is a menorah. Can you go ahead and move a menorah on Shabbos in order to save yourself from the chabari? Now, what's going on over here? Look at Rashi. Shraga de chanuksa achar shekava. So what's it just going to say in the shaila? Person wants to move their menorah after the menorah has gone out. Because remember, again, Rabosai, pretty much as you've seen, even Rabbi Shimon, who has so far the most permissive view of muktzah. Actually, it's not totally true, because we saw yesterday that Rabbi Elazar ben Reb Shimon's son, has an even more permissive view than his father. But okay, in the primary views, right? So Reb Shimon has the most permissive view. So even he agrees that when you have a lit candle, a lit lamp, a lit candelabra, you cannot move that. That's muktzah machmas iser. So because you can't go ahead and move that, so therefore we're dealing with the menorah after the flame has gone out already. So why do you want to move this menorah? Look at Rashi. Mikame chabari. Rashi says, Shelo yaruhu b'chatzer. These chabarim were pagans. And what would happen? You don't want the chabarim to see your menorah. Kidarminu maperkin de la'el. Dinosno b'tefach hasamach l'shorabim. V'yedu shetliku boner. V'hem gazru shlo lahadlik inami b'yom chagam. So two possible ideas in Rashi over here. Either these chabarim, they were pagans, and therefore again, either they did not allow the kindling of candles outside of their idolatrous house, their place of worship, or they had Yamim Tovim, where they didn't allow kindling of candles outside of their house of idolatry. Either way, right? There was a concern over here that if the chabarim see my menorah, I'm going to be in some trouble. So we'll say, so what is that look over here? So you're permitted to go ahead and carry your menorah inside in order to after it's extinguished, in order to go ahead and in order to avoid any trouble with the chabarim. So the Gemara says, we'll say, so now, when he said to them, Shapir Dami Shasad Chak Shaini. So we'll say, so again, so interestingly enough, what does that sound like? That sounds like there's no issue of muktzah. To which Rav responds, no. Understand this is different. Why? Shasad Chak Shaini. We'll say, this is a Shasad Chak. Again, obviously, if you're worried about the chabarim, this is not a normal case. So because it's not a normal case, that's why we'll allow you to carry in the menorah after it's extinguished. Under normal circumstances, we would not let you carry the menorah. Why? Because there's a concept of muktzah. But shasat chak you can. So the Gemara says, the Harmali Rav Kana Rav Ashi the Rav, because Rav Kana Rav Ashi said to Rav, Hachi hilchasa. Is this truly the halacha that you could carry the menorah? Armalahu kedaihu Rabbi Shimon lismoch alav b'shasat chak. And Rav responded, ultimately again, that's what it's kedai to rely on Rabbi Shimon in extenuating circumstances. So I will say Rav himself would really agree with Rabbi Yehuda, namely that there is muktzah and a more restrictive view of muktzah, but b'shas adchak, in extenuating circumstances, difficult circumstances, you can actually rely on the position of Rabbi Shimon. Beautiful. So we'll see, this is a very interesting case. We get now really into like the kishkas of muktzah. So Reish Lakish me Rabbi Yochanan. Chitim shezarin bekarka, ubeitim shetachas tarnagoles mahu. Listen to this interesting case. So I will say, on Friday, I take wheat, and I replant it into the ground. Now I will say, now comes Shabbos, that wheat has not yet taken root. Right? However long it takes wheat to take root, well, let's assume it's not a couple of hours, right? I planted right before Shabbos. Shabbos morning, I have a change of heart. You know what? I want to chew on some wheat, so I like to pull it out of the ground. It did not take root yet. So bepashtos, there's no problem of kotzer, right? Under normal circumstances, you can't pull a stalk of wheat onto the ground. That's kotzer. Oker davar mimokum gidulo. You cannot uproot something from the place where it grows. That's not the case over here because it hasn't taken root. That's case number one. Case number two is I put eggs underneath a hen erev Shabbos. I put the eggs there, just for the chicken to sit on the eggs for a little bit longer. So we'll say, so what's the shaila? So the word says, mahu. What's the status of these items? So do we say, ki leste le Rabbi Shimon muktzah, heicha de lo dachye bi'adayim, heicha de dachye bi'adayim isle muktzah? So we'll say, do we say that when does Rabbi Shimon hold of a permissive view of muktzah? That's halacha l'maisa. That's halacha l'maisa when I didn't do something to set the items aside for non-use. However, if I did something to actively set the items aside for non-use, even Rabbi Shimon would agree that they're muktzah. I will say, here this shaila, you see in this case, it could be that in general, Rabbi Shimon will say, we assume that items are not muktzah until you, right, unless, of course, there's an explicit reason to assume they are muktzah. But perhaps if you do something on Erev Shabbos that clearly indicates that your das is not to use these items, maybe even Rabbi Shimon agrees it becomes muktzah. What would be examples of things you could do to show that dafki you're not going to use the object? Very simple. If you go ahead and you replant wheat, that's a pretty good indication that you don't intend on reusing that item on Shabbos itself. Or you could go ahead and put eggs under the chicken in order to continue to go ahead and whatever the right lashon is, grow or mature, right? That's a pretty good indication that you don't have intention to use those eggs on Shabbos. So do we consider as if you've actively set that aside for non-use? And even Rabbi Shimon would agree that halacha l'maisa that's muktzah, or maybe not. Or maybe at the end of the day, Rabbi Shimon holds there's no muktzah. I mean, again, we understand, we don't literally mean that, but there's no muktzah. That halacha l'maisa, if it's usable, it's usable. You replanted the wheat, okay. Doesn't really make a difference. Is it usable? It's a simple shaila. Is the wheat usable? The answer is yes, because it hasn't yet taken root, and therefore, again, according to Rabbi Shimon, you can pluck it out. That's the shaila. Amarle, so he responded, Ein muktzah Rabbi Shimon el shemen shebener b'shah shu dolik. According to Rabbi Shimon Rabbosai, it sounds like what the Gemara is saying is, there is only one case of muktzah. What is the one case of muktzah? It is the case of the ner that is muktzah only when it is kindled. The only case of muktzah according to Rabbi Shimon is when you have the ner, that lamp, with the oil in it on the wick, and it's kindled. That, according to Rabbi Shimon, is muktzah. But again, remember, only at the time that it's actively lit. Why? Huktzah li'isura. The Rebbe said, now the lashon here is very important. What it sounds like it's saying over here is as follows. Since, ultimately, again, the ner is huktzah li'mitzvaso. It's set aside ultimately for the mitzvah. Which mitzvah? The mitzvah of ner Shabbos, right? There's a mitzvah to light Shabbos candles. So since this ner is set aside ultimately, again, for the performance of a mitzvah, therefore, huktzah li'isuro. Therefore, again, it is muktzah machmas iser. It becomes muktzah because it is subject to a prohibition. Which prohibition? The prohibition of kibui, of extinguishing a flame. So it sounds like what Rabbi Shimon over here. First of all, Rabbi Shimon, the Gemara now is introducing to us a new category of muktzah. What's the new category of muktzah? Huktzah l'mitzvaso. That if something is set aside for mitzvah use, suddenly again it's muktzah because it's not usable for other purposes. So what Rabbi Shimon sounds, so I'll say this is really dramatic. So what it sounds like is happening over here is, according to Rabbi Shimon, there's really only one case of muktzah, and that is a kindled Shabbos candle. A kindled Shabbos candle. Why? Why is that muktzah? Because since the candle is huktzah l'mitzvah, so it's set aside for the mitzvah of Ner Shabbos, therefore huktzah li'isuro. It is set aside, it is muktzah machmas iser. It is muktzah because it is subject to a prohibition. Which prohibition? The prohibition ultimately of extinguishing the flame. To which the Gemara says, is that true? So we'll say, what bothers the Gemara is as follows. What bothers the Gemara is it sounds like that according to Rabbi Shimon, the category of huktzah l'mitzvaso does not apply without huktzah li'isuro. In other words, we both say, what happens if you have something that is set aside for a mitzvah, but it's not necessarily subject to a prohibition? There's no additional prohibition that attaches itself to such an item. So remember again, when you have the lit candle, that candle is, or that oil, that ner, we'll call it, is huktzah mitzvah. So it's set aside to be used for Shabbos candles, and it's also subject to an isser of kibui, of extinguishing. But what happens? So what happens if you just have something that is huktzah l'mitzvah, so it is set aside for mitzvah usage, but it's not subject to an isser? It sounds like Rabbi Shimon would hold that that's not muktzah, but that's not true. But lesle huktzah l'mitzvah, so does Rabbi Shimon not hold that the category of huktzah l'mitzvah so could exist even without huktzah l'isuro? V'hatanya we learned sichicha kalacha kilchasa. If you go ahead and you adorn your sukkah, decorations, ve'itra bikram b'sadinin, and you decorate it again with sheets and cloths, hamitzuyarin, right, embroidered sheets, v'talaba egozin afarsekin shkedim rimonin Avarchile shalavanim, va'ataro shal shibolim, yenos shmanim salsos. And also you decorate your sukkah with all kinds of food. And remember again, today we do this all with plastic, fruit, and plastic. So again, the Gemara said they were mamish adorning their sukkah with real food items, right? With peaches and quinces and pomegranates and clusters of grapes and wheat kernels and oil and wine and fine flour. So you're decorating your sukkah with all of these real food items. What's the halacha? Asr lehistapik mehen an matzah yom tov acharon. The halacha is that you are not permitted to get benefit from any of these food items until after Sukkot. Until after Sukkot, that's the halacha. Only once Sukkot is over are you permitted to go ahead and get any benefit from these items. However, v'im hisna aleihen hakol if to know. But ultimately, again, if you made it tonight, or as when you put up your sukkah, if you made it tonight, and my tonight is, if I get hungry, I can go ahead and take something from the decorations and have a snack. That's the Tanai I made. So if you make it Tanai like that, it works. So we'll say, what do you see from here? Now, we'll say, what you see from here is that the moment you use these food items as decoration, they become muktzah because they are huktzah sol mitzvah. They're set aside for a mitzvah. Now, we'll say, remember, there's no isser associated with these items, right? There's no isser. So therefore, you see that what? You see that Rabbi Shimon holds that halacha l'maisa, you could have huktzah sol mitzvah even without huktzah sol le'isser. To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon. But how do you know that the opinion mentioned here reflects the view of Rabbi Shimon? So the Gemara says, the Tani Rabbi Chia bar Yosef k'meid Rabbi Yochanan, einot lim eitzim min hasukah b'yom tov ela min hasamuchla. So let's listen to this. So because listen to this quote. Rabbi Chia bar Yosef said before Rabbi Yochanan, you cannot take wood from a sukkah on Yom Tov. Now, both say the sukkah over here really just means a hut. This is a hut. So now the halacha is you can't take wood from a hut. This is not on the Yom Tov of Sukkot. This is stam. It's Yom Tov. Rashi points out, it's Pesach or Shavuos. So what happens? You happen to have a hut. Now you need some wood. So what's the halacha? You cannot take wood from the hut on Yom Tov. Now why not? Look at Rashi. Rashi's right across. The Tani Rabbi Chia. I'm sorry. The Pesach v'atzeres misukah ha'asuye l'tzel va'afilu naflu mishum muktzah. This katsoy machmas stiras ohel b'yomtiv. So say very simply, why can't you go ahead and take wood from a hut on Yom Tov? Because remember again, that wood is part of a structure. If you go ahead and you remove wood from that structure, what are you doing? You're deconstructing a structure. The act of deconstructing a structure is what? Is an act of stira. Is halacha l'maisa an act of demolition. So you cannot do that on Yom Tov. However, what can you do? Ela min hasamuch. What you can do, interestingly enough, is if you have piles of wood next to the hut, you could take from the piles next to the hut and use that on Yom Tov. Now look at Rashi. Ela min hasamuch. Rashi says, Im samach chavilos eitzim eitzel dofna leka iser muktzah dedaite iluye me'esma lemishkalinu lemachar delo sasaru ola. So we'll say, so if you have wood next to the hut, then halacha l'maaseh you could take that wood, because we assume that before Yom Tov you had in mind that if you need to use that wood for some purpose on Yom Tov, that you are permitted to do so. Omehach the Tani Rabbi Chia bar Yosef havi matzi la'osvei bereisha elanecha. So fine. So the Gemara says, however, Rabbi Shimon matir. But interestingly enough, Rabbi Shimon says that if your hut falls down on Yom Tov, you can in fact go ahead and take from the wood of the hut and use it for Yom Tov. Rashi says, Rabbi Shimon matir im nafla the lesle muktzah because let's remember again, according to Rabbi Shimon, apparently one of the points of contention is whether or not Rabbi Shimon agrees with the principle of migud iskatay lebein hashmashos iskatay lekuli shabsa. Do we say that he agrees with the principle that halacha l'maisa, once something is muktzah at the onset of ben hashmashos, it remains that way? It appears that he does not subscribe to that idea. Therefore, if the hut falls down on Yom Tiv, you can take wood, because now taking wood would no longer be an issue of demolition. The Shavin, but both agree, b'sukas achag bechag shiasura. But both Rabbi Shimon and the other opinion agree that what? That you cannot take wood from a sukkah on sukkis. Why? Both say, because what does this sound like? Because even Rabbi Shimon agrees that, I'm sorry, but if you stipulate this, in other words, if before Sukkot you stipulated that if you need a piece of wood, you could take it from your sukkah, then Einachinami, you could take it from your sukkah. But I will say, but what do you see from here? You see from here that Rabbi Shimon agrees with the concept or subscribes to the concept of muktzah, or I'll call it as huktzasa mitzvah, that you could have something that is muktzah because it is set aside for a mitzvah purpose. And even if there is no attached isser to that item, there's no huktzasa isser, Rabbi Shimon still agrees with the category of muktzah of just huktzasa mitzvah. To which the Gemara says, you're right. You're absolutely right. Rabbi Shimon ultimately again agrees, Rabbosai, that there is an independent category of muktzah called huktzasa mitzvah. That if you have something that is set aside for mitzvah use, that halacha l'maisa, and remember, set aside for mitzvah use and not usable on Shabbos. So we'll say, just a paradigmatic example of this would be tefillin. Tefillin are muktzah on Shabbos. Tefillin are huktzasa mitzvah. They're set aside for a mitzvah, but a mitzvah that ultimately, again, is not performed on Shabbos. So ultimately, again, so now what we're saying is, even Rabbi Shimon, who has a more permissive view of muktzah, will agree that if something is set aside for a mitzvah purpose, ultimately, again, that makes it muktzah. So says the Gemara. But we'll say, here's the problem. The problem is the Brisa made a statement before that said that Rabbi Shimon holds that the only form of muktzah is shemen in the ner, shemen shebener, at the time that the ner is lit. So what does that statement mean? Ella, the Gemara says, ke'ein shemen shebener minan. What we're saying is that in Rabbi Shimon's model, everything that is muktzah resembles the oil in the ner. How so? Hoil v'uktzasa l'mitzvah, huktzah li'isuro. Because also what Rabbi Shimon meant to say is as follows. Once something is huktzah l'mitzvah, it's treated halachically as if what? As if it is huktzah li'isuro. Once it becomes set aside for a mitzvah, that is the equivalent of the item being set aside for isser, and therefore it is muktzah. Look at Rashi. Ke'ein shemen ka'amina, v'lo mishum isser, ela mishum mitzvah. Dahoil v'huk, dahuktzah l'mitzvah de Shabbos, huktzah l'chozman, isser d'leikaso, v'lo yoser. De'in mitzvah so ela b'shas d'leikaso, u'mishakabo in bo mitzvah. Abba b'sukkah sa'chag mitzvah sa kol shiva, v'huktzah sa kozman mitzvah sa. So also, Halacha l'mais Rabbi Shimon is saying is like this. You have different categories of muktzah. You could have huktzasa le'isser, which is something that is aser. But I will say, but Rabbi Shimon is saying is that halacha l'maisa, any item that is huktzah l'mitzvah, by definition is huktzah le'isser. So as long as the item is set aside for mitzvah performance, right? Therefore, again, it is set aside almost kiviyachol ki-isser as well. So now let's analyze this for just a moment. So the examples of this would be, say, according to Rabbi Shimon, you lit your Shabbos candles in the ner, right? So you lit the ner for Shlakavat Shabbos. So now that ner is huktzah l'mitzvah. And because it's huktzah l'mitzvah, therefore it's huktzah le'isser, right? And therefore Rabbi Shimon will say that halacha l'maisa, that ner will be muktzah. But again, remember Rabbi Shimon's model, the ner is only muktzah when it's kindled, right? When it's lit, right? The moment it goes out, it's no longer kindled. By sukkah, Rabbi Shimon will agree that what? That sukkah, which means the actual building pieces of the sukkah, the decorations of the sukkah, will be muktzah when? For all 7 days. Now again, you can make a t'nai, you can make a condition that says, I want to benefit from the decorations, I want to benefit from the wood. Okay, if you make it t'nai, you make it t'nai. But Rabbi Shimon subscribes to this category of muktzah called ultimately huktzasa l'mitzvah. Itmar nami. Amr b'chibar Amar Rav Yochanan, ein muktzah Rabbi Shimon, ela ke'ein shemen shebener. Right? So we'll say we have another statement. Rabbi Yochanan, there is no concept of muktzah according to Rabbi Shimon except the case of like the oil in the candle or in the ner b'shashudo, like at the time that it's kindled. Hoil v'huktzah l'mitzvah, so huktzah l'isur. So we'll say here the verbiage is a bit clearer. Hoil v'huktzah l'mitzvah. So once the item is set aside ultimately again for mitzvah, therefore huktzah l'isuro. It is set aside almost as if it is a davar ha'aser. Good. So I'll say, so just to understand now, we have two categories of muktzah. Huktzah li'isuro, which means something that by definition is prohibited, which is prohibited, or I should say is muktzah because of an associated prohibition. So we'll say, so for example, any candle on Shabbos while it's at least while it's lit will be huktzah li'isur, even if it's not Shabbos candles. Why? Because ultimately there's an isur associated with the candle. What's the isur associated with the candle? Kibui. Removal of the oil ultimately again will lead to an extinguishing of the flame. Therefore, again, the whole thing becomes muktzah. There is now a new category of muktzah, also called huktzah mitzvah, when something is set aside for mitzvah performance and therefore again unusable for other reasons. That also becomes muktzah. And Rabbi Shimon himself subscribes to both of those categories. The Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, in muktzah Rabbi Shimon ella grogros v'tzimukim bilvad. So we'll say now another interesting thing. Rabbi Yehuda said in Shmuel that Rabbi Shimon holds that the only things that are muktzah are grogros. Grogros also are dried figs, and simukim are raisins, dried grapes. So the Gemara says, really? So the Gemara says, umidi achrin lo. So Rabbi Shimon only holds that it's only dried figs and dried grapes that become muktzah. Nothing else is muktzah. That was say, so just going to say what's happening over here. If you look at Rashi, ela grogros etzimukin, grogros teinim shema'ale legagol yavshan, umishnishtahu shama'at ein ru'uyin la'achila adshis yavshu. V'chein tzimukim dainav. So remember, how did you make figs, dried figs and raisins? You would take moist figs, take them up to your roof, or moist grapes, take them up to your roof, and let them dry out in the sun. Now, the interesting part about making dried figs or dried grapes is apparently there would be this stage in time where you had already begun the drying out process, right? The drying out of the items had begun, yet what? Yet, halacha l'maisa, the items were inedible. So like there's this stage where they leave the fresh fruit category, have not yet transitioned into the dried fruit category. They're in the drying process and they become inedible during that stage of the process. So says the Gemara something very interesting. So the Gemara says, and that's it. According to Rabbi Shimon, there's no other time where halacha l'maisa, again, these items become, there's no other forms of muktzah, according to Rabbi Shimon, to which the Gemara says, V'hatanya, we learned, haya ochel b'te'inim, v'hoser v'ha'elan legag. If a person was eating figs, and then he had leftover figs, and he brought them up to the roof to dry out. Lasos min grogros, to make dried figs, ba'navim v'hoser v'ha'elan legag, lasos min tzimukim, I'm eating grapes, and I have leftover grapes, and I want to go ahead and bring them up to the roof in order to dry out. Lo yochal adchi yasmin. You cannot go ahead and eat them. You cannot eat them until you actively go ahead and designate them for use on Shabbos. Okay, so the Marsevechina Tamar Ba'afarsekin v'chavushin ubishar kolmei peros, and the same thing I both say is true with peaches and with quinces, right, and with all other types of fruit. Okay, so we'll say, whose opinion is this? Money. Ilim Rabbi Yehuda, if you want to say it's Rabbi Yehuda, Uma heichad lo dachye bi'adayim isli muktzah, heichad dachye bi'adayim lakoshkin. Now both say, now understand what's happening over here. You're eating fruit, you have some leftovers, you take them up to the roof. So essentially what the Gemara is saying over here is once you put them up on the roof, they become muktzah, because the act of putting them up on the roof indicates that you're no longer going to partake of them, at least until they finish drying out. So whose opinion is that they're muktzah? Now, both say to say that it's Rabbi Yehuda, that's obvious, because Rabbi Yehuda even holds, even when you don't actively set aside things for non-use, they become muktzah. Alachas kama v'kama, in this case, where you're setting them aside for non-use. How? By taking them up to the roof. Of course, they're going to be muktzah. Alalav Rabbi Shimon. Rather, it must be ultimately, again, that's what? That it reflects the view of Rabbi Shimon. To which the Gemara says, no. The Olam Rabbi Yehuda, you need it's Rabbi Yehuda. Both say, so what's the chiddush over here? Because this is a case of where you're eating the fruit. Sakadait chamina kevan da ka'achil va'azil. Since you're eating, ultimately again, and then taking stuff up to the roof. Lowly by hazmana. So I say, I might have thought that since everything over here is taking place in the context of a meal, of eating, so then maybe that gives me access even to the stuff I'm putting on the roof, right? I don't have to actively go ahead and be mazmin and designate those arnas that I'm going to eat them, because this is all taking place in the context of an act of eating. Therefore, again, kamash malon kevan dehelon lagag asuche aschila daite minayhu. The Rebbe said the novelty over here is that Allah Almighty, even though again I'm removing these grapes and these figs in the course of eating them and taking them up to the roof, and I might have thought that because I'm doing it in the context of eating, therefore halacha l'maisa, I don't have to designate them for use. Kamash malon, though. Kamash malon, once you take something up to the roof, what have you effectively done? You've ultimately gone ahead and designated it for non-use. Therefore, if you want to redesignate it and use it on Shabbos, you would have to actively do so. Beautiful. Let's go weiter. So the Gemara goes weiter. Ba'amine Rabbi Shimon bar Rabbi mi Rabbi. Other interesting case, we'll say, I'm a base. Patzile Tamra, the Rabbi Shimon Mahu. So this is an interesting case. Patzile Tamra, if you look at Rashi, Tamarem hanikolotim kodem bishulon, v'konsan osam b'salam she'osam milulovin, famous pashos melin. So we'll say these are a type of dates. I don't know what type of dates, but they're a type of dates that are dafka harvested before they're mature. Now, what it sounds like over here is that they don't mature on the tree. So instead, what you do is you go out and you pick them, and you put them in baskets that are made out of palm branches. And the dates kind of complete their maturation in these baskets. So Batzile Tamra, so we'll say if you pick these unripe dates and you put them in the basket, ultimately to go ahead and ripen. So we'll say, so the shaila is, are you permitted, what's their status? What's their status if you want to eat from them before they fully mature? So according to Rabbi Shimon, would such an act be permitted or not? So we'll say, so the shaila is, how do we view those ripening dates in the basket? Would Rabbi Shimon say, like Rashi, Rabbi Shimon say that they're like grogros and simukin, that once it's up on the roof, you can't go ahead and partake of it? Or is it different? Amarlei, ein muktzah Rabbi Shimon ela grogros v'tzimukin bilvad. So Rabbi said, to which they answered, according to Rabbi Shimon, the only case of muktzah is grogros and simukin. So we'll say, so why? Now Rashi here says something amazing. So why does Rabbi Shimon say it's only grogros and simukin? Look at Rashi, ela grogros v'tzimukin ti'ikatarti. Because we'll say grogros and simukim satisfy two criteria. Number one, didachinu bi'adayim v'lo chazu. Number one, you did something to actively set them aside for non-use, which was what? You put them on the rooftop, and they're also not edible. They're also not edible. So we'll say this is actually this is really incredible, because what the Gemara now will say now we're actually getting into like real concrete definitions. According to Rabbi Shimon, in order for something to become muktzah, two things have to happen. Number one, you do a maisa that shows ultimately again that you do not plan on using this item. So you take the items, you take the grapes and the figs up to the roof. Remember, the process of drying out, I don't know how long it takes, but it sounds like it's more than 24 hours. That's what it sounds like, right? So number one, I'm doing a maisa that shows I'm not going to use this item. And number two, it's inedible. So we'll say, so essentially, if you want to take us back to yeshiva days a little bit, according to Rabbi Shimon, in order for an item to be muktzah, there has to be a chalos in the gavra and a chalos in the chaftza. In other words, that the gavra, I must do something in order to show that I'm not going to use it. So I set it aside on the roof, and the cheftza, the object itself, is inedible. If you satisfy those two criteria in the gavra and in the cheftza, then halacha l'maisa, according to Rabbi Shimon, the item becomes muktzah. So the Gemara says, which you begin to see, if those are the criteria, then you begin to see why Rabbi Shimon has a very permissive stance on muktzah, because most items don't fall into that category. I will say, think about this just a moment. According to this definition, most of the stuff around your house that we normally consider muktzah don't fall into this category. So watch this. The Gemara says, is that true for Rabbi Leslie muktzah? Does Rabbi really hold such a restrictive view of muktzah? V'hatnan. When I say restrictive, I really mean limited, right? And his limited scope of muktzah, of course, creates a very permissive view. For Rabbi Leslie muktzah v'hatnan, Ein mashkenes v'shoklenes hamid bario. So we'll listen to this. So does Rebbe? So now it's interesting because remember this is Rebbe quoting Rebbe Shimon. So we're assuming if Rebbe is quoting Rebbe Shimon, that means he subscribes to this view. So is that true that Rebbe does not, quote unquote, does not hold of muktzah? What about the following case? It's interesting actually. Vatanan ein mashken v'shoklenes hamid bario. So let's remember again. The halacha is that on Yom Tov you're permitted to shecht. Right? You want fresh meat on Yom Tov, you are permitted to shecht. The Gemara now gets into which type of animals you're permitted to shecht. Now remember, in order to shecht, so that animal has to be muchan, right? That animal has to be set aside for use. Now, lav dafka, actively set aside for use. Like you don't have to go into your flock and say, you know what, cow, I'm using you on Yom Tiv. But rather, again, you're going to, we'll see. So you can't water and shecht. I guess we would call this today, like free-range animals. But these of us say were like extreme free-range animals. What we're going to see is these animals were mamish out and about and not at all within the home area. So because that, Rabbi say they're not muchan. Remember, to use something on Yom Tiv, it has to be quote-unquote prepared. Well, we'll see in Maseches Be'er exactly what that means. It has to be prepared. So if an animal is out on the range and I have no shaykhs to it, Erev Yom Tiv, I can't shecht it. Both say the lashon of watering, of mashkin, Rashi points out, is before they would shecht an animal, they would often give it a lot to drink. The reason for that is because apparently if the animal is well hydrated, the hide comes off easier. So that's a din and ease. It's also, remember when we're moving the hide, the idea is you want to remove as much of the hide in one piece as you can, as that makes the hide more valuable. Avol, mashkin v'shoktenes habaisos, but you can go ahead and water and shecht baisos. So we'll say, what are baisos? Baisos are domestic animals. Domestic animals, animals that are in, because again, those are considered to be muchan. Those are prepared for Yom Tov use. V'tanya, Elohim midbario. So we'll say, so now, interest of let's get into the definition. What's a free-range animal? What's a midbar animal? Koshiyotzeitz bepesach v'nichnasos berevia. Animals, ultimately, again, that go out to graze in the open pastures on Pesach. So they leave home on Pesach, and they come back by the first rains. Let's remember again, when in the first rains, so Cheshvan, right? They come back for the first rains in Cheshvan. Baisos, those are free-range animals, right? Baisos, what are home animals, right? We'll call it domesticated animals. Those animals that go out to graze outside of the tchum every day. But they come home to sleep, right? So they go out of the tchum ultimately to graze, but they come back within the tchum ultimately to go ahead and sleep. So the Gemara says, Rebbe says, Omer ilu ve'ilu baisos. Both of these types of animals are both baisos. Ve'ilohim midbarios. So what are considered to be the free-range animals? Kol shero'os be'efer v'nichnasos v'ein nichnasos liyishov lo bimos hachama v'lo bimos hagishamin. So we'll say Rebbe says that ultimately free-range animals are animals that ultimately literally pasture in the efer, which means they pasture who knows where, and they never come back into habitation, right? Into habitable areas, not during the summer and not during the winter. We'll say, but what do you see? Now remember, we'll say why are these definitions important? Because the Gemara is telling me what kind of animals you can shecht on Yom Tiv, what kind of animals you can't shecht on Yom Tiv. On Yom Tiv, you could shecht domestic animals. You cannot shecht non-domestic animals. And therefore, we'll say, so again, what do you see? You see that Rebbe does subscribe to the idea, ultimately, of muktzah, to which the Gemara says, Iba Yisema, Hani Nami Kigrogos Vitzimukin Damyan. So we'll say, could be that according to Rebbe, free-range animals are just like grogros and simukin. Namely, what Rebbe was saying, that they're set aside for non-use. You actively set them aside. How? By allowing them to go ahead and go out, right? And also, just like the organisms that are not edible, so too these animals are not readily accessible. So it could be, Rabbi say, that it could be that free-range animals satisfy the muktzah criteria of Rabbi Shimon. Remember, the muktzah criteria of Rabbi Shimon is twofold. Number one, you do something to actively set aside for non-use, and the item itself is not really all that usable. The other possibility, by Sema, The Drav Rabbi Shimon Kamarle. Maybe Rebbe is addressing his words in accordance with the position of Rabbi Shimon. But ultimately, again, Rebbe himself does not subscribe to Rabbi Shimon's approach. Rebbe himself holds a muktzah. The possibility is that Rebbe is addressing his statement in accordance with the words of the Rabbanon. And this is what he was saying. Lididi less than muktzah klal. Rebbe says, for me, according to me, I don't hold of muktzah. I hold the Rabbi Shimon. Lididachu, however, according to you, Rabbanon, odu limihas deheichav diyotzos bepesach v'nichnasos berevia tebaisos ninu. But Rabbi says, the Rabbanon at least agree, at least be molded to me, that when the animals leave home on Pesach, and ultimately, again, they come back by the first rain, that those are considered to be domestic animals. For the Rabbanan will say, no, Amrulay, la lo midbarios ninu. So both say, so they argue on the definition of domestic versus free-range animals. Amr Rabbi Bar Bachana, Amr Rabbi Yochanan. Amru, halacha k'Rabbi Shimon. So we'll say, so now again, we begin to, so now that we've seen Rabbi Shimon, we've seen Rabbi Yehuda, we've seen that even Rabbi Shimon, so we now have a definition of Rabbi Shimon. When does an item become muktzah? Two criteria according to Rabbi Shimon. Number one, you did something to actively set it aside for non-use, and the item itself is relatively unusable. Right? That's Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon holds a muktzah machmas mitzvah, muktzah machmas iser. Bepashtos does not agree with the concept of migo diskatzoy leben hashmashos, iskatzoy l'chol yoma. And Rabbi Huda, of course, has a much more restrictive view. So now the Gemara says, Amr Rabbi Yochanan, Amr halacha k'Rabbi Shimon. That the halacha follows Rabbi Shimon in muktzah. So is that true? Rabbi Yochanan actually say this. So we'll say one time there was an old man from Kiruya. Other people say it was from Suruya. These are the name of places. And what did he say? And they asked the following shot of Rabbi Yochanan. Interesting case. Kina shatana golas. We'll say if you have a chicken coop, this obviously is a small coop. Mahu lital b'Shabbos. Can you carry the chicken coop on Shabbos? Right? Can you carry the chicken coop on Shabbos? So the Gemara says, Amrlei, klomasay el tarnagolin. No, I don't understand. Why would you be able to go ahead and carry it? The chicken coop is made for chickens. Chicken coop is made for chickens. And therefore, bepashtos, it is what? It is muktzah. Rabbi say, look at Rashi. El tarnagolin. Hilchach havile melachto le'isr. Rabbi say, this is a kli shemalachto le'isr. This kli serves chickens. Chickens are livestock, right? Our livestock, right? Our animals are muktzah on Shabbos. So therefore, this is a kli that serves a muktzah purpose. If it's a kli that serves a muktzah purpose, then ultimately you can't use it, you can't lift it, you can't carry it on Shabbos. So we'll say, so what do you see from here? You see that ultimately, again, that halacha l'maisa, Rabbi Yochanan holds of muktzah, right? Rabbi Yochanan just said that halacha follows Rabbi Shimon. Right? Rabbi Shimon holds a very permissive view of muktzah. Here they ask Rabbi Yochanan, what's the status of the chicken coop? To which Rabbi Yochanan says, well, the chicken coop serves chickens. If it serves chickens, right, the chickens are muktzah. Therefore, it's a kli shemelachto le'isr. It is a kli, ultimately, again, that has a prohibited purpose on Shabbos, and therefore it is muktzah. So I'm asking on what's the case? The ispe efrach meis. But we say could be this case is different. Why? Because lamaisa, maybe inside of the chicken coop is a dead chick. Rashi says, what's the problem? Ultimately, again, the dead chick is not fit for consumption because remember, it died without shechita. And Abba say you would not be able to go ahead and feed this to your dogs either. Why not? Because Abba say the assumption is that in order to feed something to your dogs on Shabbos, it had to be fit for canine consumption prior to Shabbos. But ultimately, again, if it was not fit for canine consumption before Shabbos, you can't go ahead and feed it to your dog on Shabbos. Therefore, it could very well be that halacha l'maisa, that's why the chicken coop is muktzah, because it has inside of it a dead chick. To which the Gemara says, that makes sense according to the opinion that says that Rabbi Shimon holds that an animal that died on Shabbos is muktzah. It's muktzah because it can't be used by people for consumption because it died without shechita, and it can't be given to your dogs because it wasn't fit before Shabbos. El Marbrit Rav Yosef Mishmeid Rav Adam Rachalukar B'Shimon Hafilu Ba'alchem Shemesu Shehin Mutarin Ma'ikal Meimar. But was according to the other opinion of Rabbi Shimon, the other version of Rabbi Shimon, which says that Rabbi Shimon holds that when an animal dies on Shabbos, it is not muktzah. Why not? Because even though a person can't eat it, you can give it to your dogs. So what is there to say? If that's the case, why would the chicken coop be muktzah? Oh, there's an egg. There's an egg in the coop, a chicken-laden egg in the coop. And I will say, apparently, Rabbi Shimon subscribes to the concept of nolad. Nolad is another category of muktzah. That if something is born on Shabbos, or on Yom Tov for that matter, there is a category of muktzah of nolad. So maybe the case in question is where a chicken laid an egg in a chicken coop on Shabbos, and that's why Rabbi Shimon paskin that the coop is going to be muktzah, because halacha l'maisa Rabbi Shimon subscribes to nolad. I v'hamar of Nachman, is that true? Man de isle muktzah isle nolad, the lesle muktzah lesle nolad. So we'll say, but yet we have another opinion that says that we'll say it is only those who hold of a more restrictive view of muktzah subscribe to the concept of nolad, but those who have a more permissive view of muktzah do not subscribe to nolad, which would sound like Rabbi Shimon does not subscribe to the concept of nolad, to which the Gemara says, the isbe beitzas be'efroach. I will say, what's the case? The case ultimately is where there is a beitzas efroach. So ultimately, if you look at Rashi, the isbe beitza shenolda b'yom. I'm sorry, the isbe beitza efroach v'kelav la'achalei mishim klipa. You have an egg, and the egg has a chick inside of it. So that egg is not fit for human consumption, and apparently you can't give it to a dog either, because apparently, again, a dog can't get through that shell. Interesting, that's what Rashi says. Therefore, again, you have something inside of that coop that is not fit for anyone, and therefore, by definition, is going to be muktzah. So we'll say now, we have another opinion that says, no, Hilchos Muktzah follows Rabbi Huda, the more restrictive view of muktzah. Rabbi Shimon Levi Amar Halacha Rabbi Shimon. And Rabbi Shimon Levi says Halacha Rabbi Shimon. So we'll say Machlokas. Machlokas, who do we pass like in Hilchos Muktzah? The more restrictive view of Rabbi Huda or the more permissive view of Rabbi Shimon? Amar Rav Yosef, Hainu Damar Rabbi Rachana Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amru Halacha Rabbi Shimon, Amru V'lei Lo Svira Lei. So we'll say ultimately again he said Rabbi Yochanan's Halacha follows Rabbi Shimon. He said it, but he himself does not subscribe to this idea. Amar Li Abaye Rabbi Yosef. Va'at lo tizbara to Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Yehuda. Do you not hold that Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Yehuda? Ha Rabbi Abba Rabbi Asi iklo lebe Rabbi Abba de min chifa. So we'll say we're going to see a very interesting Maisa. We'll stop over here. We'll pick up Amir Hashem with this Maisa, but just understand, Jeremy, you'll send me a list today of who was online. You see, we have a smaller olam. I'm gonna have to make some follow-up phone calls today. So we'll say, so just to understand, what we're ending off over here is as follows. We're ending off halacha l'maisa with a fundamental. So now we've spent the last number of days focusing on the machlokes Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Huda. Now we see machloksim between the other rabbanim. Who does the halacha follow? So we're going to continue with that tomorrow, Mirat Hashem, and then God willing, drill down to the halacha l'maisa subsequently. Shkach Rabosai, we'll start davening as soon as Moshe is ready. Shkach.